It has been a bit since my last video, hasn't it? I hope you have all been well and taken care of yourselves. Now dare I say we have a new meta for warlocks out there. And the reason I say that is because I used this build to complete the new activity called the Nether, and I did it on expert and solo at that. I only died 2 times throughout the entire run, and I cleared it in under 45 minutes. So I would say that is pretty dang good for a solo expert right now, especially since I bet you guys have found it pretty rough in there with the lack of healing that we have available to us. I do think Bungie already said they were going to adjust the healing a bit, and I think they were doing that very quickly. But with this build, I didn't have much of a problem, and that's mostly thanks to the blind debuff and having 3 different ways to trigger it on entire groups of enemies, then being able to pop our super every 15 to 30 seconds, and letting our super damage just handle all the bosses. I used it 4 times on the final ogre boss. I also used it 4 times on the big meatball, which was my second boss, and I think I actually used it on the tormentor 4 times as well. He was my first boss. All of this is possible thanks to our new aspect on the Arc Warlock, changes to the Arc subclass for the extra survivability with Amplified, and we pair that with the blind sources for the awesome crowd control, then add the extra damage with the new bolt charge buff, and pair that with a unlimited super that does great damage. Then we take a new exotic weapon that intrinsically applies jolt and a blinding explosion all from the weapon itself once you know how to use it, and a big buff that we also got to our exotic armor piece that lets us cast Chaos Reach all the time. So all of this combines to make a beast of a build, and that is why I really do believe that this build will be one of the best builds on Warlock for quite some time now. First, for the super, you want to take Chaos Reach. This super does great damage. It creates that jolting lightning strike with sustained damage on a target that you see going off, and it can stun overload champions for us. And then we take the Flashbang Grenade. This will stun unstoppable champions because when it goes off it blinds targets, and this has a big blind radius. So when you see a spawn of enemies come in, just chuck this Flashbang Grenade and you'll blind everything. And blind is a strong, powerful debuff. I can't stress how strong it really is, and I've done multiple arc builds in the past where I tell you guys to use blind, so make sure to spec into it. For our first aspect, we'll take Electrostatic Mind. When we defeat targets with our arc abilities, which is our grenade or melee, or our super, or we defeat jolted or blinded targets, we create Ionic Traces. This really has no cooldown. You'll see 4 or 5 Ionic Traces coming back to you at a single time, and then when we collect an Ionic Trace, it makes us amplified thanks to this. Now remember, Ionic Traces gives roughly about 15% ability energy to all 3 of our abilities, and since our Flashbang Grenade only has a minute and 30 cooldown, and our Healing Rift only has a minute and 22 second cooldown, we do get a big chunk of our ability energy from these Ionic Traces. Now Amplified got some changes this season as well. You get a 15% damage reduction up all the time while you're amplified. And you might think that's not a lot, but it actually is, especially when you start pairing it with different things. Also, when you're amplified, it makes targets not be able to target you as well when they're shooting at you, so they should be missing you more often than not. For our second aspect, we'll take the new one called Ionic Sentry. When you defeat targets with kinetic or arc weapons, or your arc abilities, you charge up an arc turret that periodically chains lightning between nearby targets, and it grants a stack of bolt charge on each hit. So this is generating bolt charges on its own without you doing anything. It's just chaining lightning, hitting stuff, and creating bolt charges for you. But once you have a single bolt charge, sustained weapon damage generates stacks of bolt charge as well. And then at maximum stacks, any ability damage generates a powerful bolt of arc lightning at the target's location. So this could be your ranged melee, your grenade, or your Chaos Reach. So your Chaos Reach can now do quite a bit more damage when we have that bolt charge available when we're casting it. Also, when you do throw out this Ionic Sentry, it will blind all nearby targets on its initial impact. Again, this will stun unstoppable champions, and when a spawn of enemies come in, just place that Ionic Sentry right in between them, and you'll blind everything there. And blinding everything is important for survivability, and it plays into our weapon in a second that we'll go over. Now for our fragments, we will still take Spark of Resistance. This is a 25% damage reduction when there's 3 or more enemies near us, and in this new activity that should be up quite often. And when you pair that with the 15% damage reduction from Amplified, we now have a good base of damage reduction on our Arc Warlock. Next we'll take Spark of Discharge. Arc Weapon Final Blows have a chance to create Ionic Trace. This just plays more into Ionic Traces for us. We are going to use an arc weapon with this build. And then the second part of Spark of Discharge now is collecting an Ionic Trace grants you a stack of bolt charge. So our Ionic Sentry is building up bolt charges on its own as it shocks enemies. Our weapon is building up bolt charge with our sustained weapon damage. Since we have a bolt charge from the Ionic Sentry already, right? Then all those Ionic Traces that are coming back to us will also give us bolt charges. So we can stack to 10 charges very quickly with this build. Next, we'll add in Spark of Frequency. The first part here is melee hits increase your equipped weapons reload speed and stability for a short duration. Kind of a nice bonus here, but the main part we're taking advantage of is the second part. While amplified, the effects are increased and you gain increased stacks of bolt charge from all sources. This basically just doubles the bolt charge. So if you throw out your Ionic Sentry and just watch what it does on a single enemy, you'll see that every time it shocks an enemy, it'll give you 2 stacks of bolt charge. We'll also take Spark of Shock here. Your arc grenades jolt targets. This just allows that flashbang grenade that you're going to have up all the time, thanks to those ionic traces, be able to jolt enemies on hit and blind them all on hit. Jolt is a strong debuff on enemies. When you apply Jolt to an enemy and shoot them, and that shot goes off and hits everything around them, it's probably still the best ad clear in the game. But our grenade also blinds, so it just makes things even better. For stats on the build, of course aim for 100 resilience. It's your damage reduction in all activities. You get 30% from your 100 resilience. You get 25% from Spark of Resistance. You get 15% from Amplified, and it's harder for the enemies to hit you when you're amplified. So a lot of different sources keeping you alive. You push up your discipline as high as possible, and your recovery up as high as possible as well. Now the weapon we're going to use is the new Season Pass weapon called the Lodestar. The intrinsic trait it has is Starlight Beam. This weapon fires a low intensity arc beam with enhanced stability and accuracy. Now we have Arc Alignment as a trait and also Phase Converter. Arc Alignment states that dealing arc damage from any source aligns the battery coils. When alignment is complete, you hold R for that special reload, and enable the hip-fired Starlight Beam to apply Jolt to any targets that it damages. And when you aim down sights, it will slow down the rate at which the battery drains on the bottom left when you see that you have the buff available. And then the next part is Phase Converter. When aiming down sights, the beam is compressed into a short high energy burst like a pulse rifle. And the important part here is that it interacts with targets affected by arc debuffs. This means the Jolt debuff and the blind debuff, and we are blinding within our entire subclass. Since it interacts with targets affected by arc debuffs, it deals increased damage and causing them to detonate into blinding explosions on final blows. So basically the way that you should be using this weapon is of course to build up its meter. This is easily done just by shooting enemies with it or by using your arc abilities. You will have that bar up all the time. Next, you're just gonna hold R for that special reload, hit 1 or 2 enemies with the hipfire beam to apply the jolt debuff, then sight in and kill those enemies. The reason we sight in is because it slowly drains the battery then, right? So you get a longer time for this. And it also creates the blinding explosion and deals more damage. Now, if that blinding explosion goes off and hits other enemies, you just stay sighted in and aim at the next enemy and take them down. If there is no debuffed enemy after that kill, just go back to the hip fire, hit that next enemy to apply the jolt debuff, and then sight back in and kill the enemy. It's very simple once you get the rotation down. It's build up your meter, special reload, hip fire to apply jolt, sight in to kill the jolted enemy to apply the blinding explosions, and grant you that bonus in increased damage. Now another thing that I take advantage of as well is I use this weapon to apply jolt to those bosses and then use my chaos reach on them. Just so it allows the jolt debuff to go off over and over as my chaos reach is damaging the enemy to add extra damage. So you have jolt going off for extra damage, chaos reach doing its damage, and if you started with the bolt charge, again, bolt charge lightning going down for more damage. For our exotic armor piece, we're going to take the Geomag stabilizers. I've done multiple builds with this, and the perk on it is close enough. Damaging targets with Chaos Reach extends its duration. That allows you to do all that extra damage to bosses, right? And then collecting Ionic Traces grants you energy for Chaos Reach. This got bumped up to like 7%. I believe it was at 2%. This is how we can get our super back so fast. And remember, we create Ionic Traces from anything that we kill because we're blinding and jolting everything. And then also sprinting while near max bolt charge will grant stacks over time. So if you are at like 6 or 7 bolt charges and you need to hit 10, you can sprint, hit 10, and then cast Chaos Reach, so you can guarantee the bolt charge goes off, and your super does all its damage. For mods on the build, there's really nothing special. The subclass, the exotic weapon, and the exotic armor does all the heavy lifting for you. On your helmet, just make sure you have an arc siphon to play into that lodestar. On the gauntlets, I had an arc loader. I had firepower to create orbs of power from that blinding grenade, and a bolstering detonation. So when I damage something with my grenade, it gives me class ability energy back. On the chest piece, that is your damage reduction. So in this activity that you just watched me do, I had a void, arc, and solar damage resist on. Then on my boots, I had recuperation, so I gain health each time I pick up an orb of power, innervation to gain grenade energy when I pick up an orb of power, and absolution. You could probably drop absolution and innervation here if you want, and put on 2 arc surges, if you want to add more damage to your arc weapons. On the class item I add Reaper, so I spawn an Orb of Power every time I kill an enemy after I use my Rift. And then for this specific activity that I was running, of course I'm trying to stay alive, so I had Proximity Ward and Healthy Finisher. This allows finishers to heal me, and it consumes 1 stack of armor charge. Obviously, the way that the healing is set up in this new activity in the Nether, I wasn't seeing much benefit from this, but hopefully that gets changed when Bungie changes some things. And then Proximity Ward allows you to gain a powerful overshield while performing your finisher. Just to keep me a little bit more safe, there's also a boon throughout the activity that allows you to gain health when you finish an enemy. So all of that kind of just plays in together. For the artifact, I didn't really have much on yet. The only 2 really affecting arc was Dielectric. Defeating arc debuff targets grants bolt charges, which didn't really matter because I'm already getting plenty of bolt charges. And then Flashover. When you gain maximum bolt charge, you also become amplified, and lightning bolts deal more damage. Those are the only 2 I had unlocked and was pairing with the build. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you found it helpful. Go give this build a try. And there's also a Mobalytics link and the dim link down below in the description if you want to check that out. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys all in the next video. Have a great rest of your day.